Alien cat. Girls were sold for meat. He spent his last credits to buy them. The cargo bay of the Meridian station reeked of desperation and unwashed bodies. Marcus Kane stood at the edge of the crowd, pressing against the auction platform, where alien beings were being sold like livestock. His weathered hands gripped the last credit chip he owned, containing exactly 347 galactic credits. Everything else had been spent trying to keep his failing salvage business afloat after the corporate wars had destroyed most of the outer rim trading posts. The auctioneer was a grotesque vulgarian whose multiple eyes scanned the crowd with predatory hunger. His voice boomed through the translation devices as he gestured toward a cage containing 3 figures huddled together in the shadows. Marcus squinted through the dim lighting and felt his stomach drop when he realized what he was looking at. 3 young females of a species he had never seen before crouched together behind the energy bars. They appeared humanoid, but possessed distinctly feline features, including pointed ears that twitched with fear and long tails that wrapped around their bodies defensively. Their fur was a mix of silver and black stripes, and their large eyes glowed with an inner light that spoke of intelligence and terror. The auctioneer continued his pitch, describing them as prime breeding stock from the recently conquered world of Felinia Prime. He explained that their meat was considered a delicacy among the upper classes of the core worlds, and that these 3 specimens were young and healthy. The crowd murmured with interest as various buyers calculated potential profits. Marcus felt sick. He had heard rumors about what happened to conquered species, but seeing it firsthand was different. The corporate alliance had strict policies about the treatment of sentient beings, but enforcement was spotty at best in the outer rim territories. These creatures were clearly intelligent based on how they huddled together for comfort and the way their eyes tracked the movements of the crowd. A fat merchant from the Centauri system raised his hand and bid 200 credits. Another voice called out 250. Marcus watched as the price climbed steadily upward while the 3 aliens pressed closer together. He could see tears streaming down their faces, and his heart clenched painfully in his chest. The bidding reached 300 credits and seemed to stall. The auctioneer looked around, impatiently demanding higher offers. Marcus knew he should walk away. 347 credits was all he had left in the universe. If he spent it on these aliens, he would have nothing left to restart his business or even buy food for himself. But as he watched the terror in their eyes, something inside him snapped. He thought about his daughter Emma, who had died in the corporate wars 5 years ago. She had been about the same age as these creatures, and had possessed the same kind of innocent fear when the bombs started falling on their colony. 325 credits came from a slaver who planned to sell them to the fighting pits on Gamma Station. Marcus raised his hand without conscious thought. 347 credits, he called out. His voice carried across the cargo bay with surprising strength. The crowd turned to look at him, and he felt every eye in the place studying his threadbare clothes and desperate appearance. The auctioneer looked pleased at the higher bid, but the slaver immediately countered with 350. Marcus felt his heart sink as he realized he was out of credits. He started to lower his hand when one of the aliens in the cage looked directly at him. Their eyes met across the crowded space, and he saw something that made his decision for him. Hope. She was hoping he would save them. This complete stranger who had never seen him before was looking at him with desperate hope that somehow he would find a way to help them. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest as he made the most important decision of his life. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his father's old war medal. It was the only thing of value he had left besides the credits. The medal was made of pure platinum and had been awarded to his father for heroism during the Andromedan conflict. Marcus had sworn never to sell it, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The Bulgarian auctioneer accepted the metal as additional payment after a quick scan confirmed its authenticity. The total value came to just over 400 credits, which was enough to outbid the slaver. Marcus watched in a daze as the cage was unlocked, and the three aliens were led toward him. Up close, they were even more obviously sentient than he had realized. They moved with grace and intelligence, and their eyes held depths of emotion that no mere animal could possess. The eldest of the three looked to be in her early 20s by human standards, while the other two appeared to be teenagers. They were all thin from malnutrition, and their striped fur was matted with dirt and fear. The auctioneer handed Marcus a data pad containing ownership documents and instructions for care and feeding. Marcus accepted it, numbly wondering what the hell he was going to do now. He had just spent every credit he owned plus his most precious possession to buy 3 alien slaves who were destined to be sold for meat. As they walked away from the auction platform, the eldest alien spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Her words were in a language he did not recognize, but her tone was unmistakably grateful. Marcus looked down at her and saw that she was crying again, but this time the tears seemed to be of relief rather than terror. They made their way through the crowded station corridors toward the docking bay, where Marcus had left his small cargo hauler. The ship was old and barely space-worthy, but it was the only home he had left. He had been planning to sell it to raise enough credits for passage to the core worlds, where he might find work, but now that plan was impossible. The 3 aliens followed him silently, staying close together for comfort. Marcus noticed that they moved with an odd grace that suggested they were more at home in low gravity than the standard 1G maintained on the station. Their large eyes took in everything around them with obvious intelligence and curiosity despite their fear. When they reached his ship, Marcus palmed the entry lock and gestured for them to enter. The cargo hauler was small with only basic living quarters, but it was clean and well maintained. The aliens looked around with wonder, as if they had never seen the inside of a proper spacecraft before. Marcus activated the universal translator and waited for it to sync with their language patterns. After a few minutes of listening to their whispered conversations, the device chimed to indicate it was ready. He cleared his throat and spoke carefully. "My name is Marcus Kane," he said. "I am not going to hurt you. You are safe now." The eldest alien stepped forward and spoke in heavily accented but understandable galactic standard. "My name is Luna," she said. "These are my sisters Mira and Kira. We are grateful for your kindness, but we do not understand why you would spend so much to save us." Marcus sat down heavily in his pilot's chair and rubbed his tired eyes. He was not sure he understood it himself. 3 hours ago, he had been a desperate man trying to scrape together enough credits to survive another day. Now he was responsible for 3 alien beings who had nowhere else to go. "Where are you from?" he asked. Luna wrapped her arms around herself, and her tail twitched nervously. "We are from Felinia Prime," she said. "Our world was attacked by ships from the Corporate Alliance 6 months ago. They said we were harboring rebels, but there were no rebels on our world. We were farmers and artisans. We never hurt anyone." Marcus felt his jaw clench. He had heard variations of this story dozens of times during his years working the Outer Rim. The Corporate Alliance had been expanding aggressively for the past decade, claiming that they were bringing order and prosperity to the galaxy. In reality, they were strip mining worlds for resources and enslaving any populations that could not defend themselves. "What happened to your families?" he asked gently. Luna's eyes filled with tears again, and she looked away. "They were killed in the bombardment," she whispered. "We were in the fields when the ships came. By the time we made it back to our village, there was nothing left but smoke and fire." Her sisters moved closer and put their arms around her for comfort. Marcus felt his heart breaking for them. They were just children who had lost everything and everyone they had ever known. He thought again about his daughter Emma and how she had looked in those final moments before the bombs fell. The corporate alliance had been responsible for Emma's death too. They had claimed the colony was harboring terrorists, but in reality, they had just wanted the mineral rights to the planet. Thousands of innocent people had died in the bombardment, including his wife and daughter. Marcus stood up and walked to the small galley where he began preparing food for his unexpected guests. He had enough rations to last a few weeks if they were careful, but after that, he had no idea what they would do. The three aliens watched him with obvious hunger as he heated up protein bars and hydration packs. When he set the food in front of them, they looked at him uncertainly. Luna spoke first. "We have no way to repay your kindness," she said. "We own nothing and have no family to offer compensation." "Why are you helping us?" Marcus thought about how to answer that question. The truth was complicated and painful, but these beings deserved honesty after everything they had been through. He sat down across from them and met Luna's eyes directly. 5 years ago, my family was killed in a corporate alliance bombardment," he said. "My wife and daughter died because some executive decided our planet had resources worth taking. I know what it feels like to lose everything and have nowhere to turn." The three aliens stared at him with understanding dawning in their eyes. They had recognized a kindred spirit in him, someone who had also suffered at the hands of the same forces that had destroyed their world. "We are sorry for your loss," Mira said quietly. Her voice was softer than her sister's, but carried the same note of pain. Marcus nodded his thanks and gestured toward the food. "You need to eat," he said. "We can figure out what comes next after you have regained your strength." As they ate, Marcus studied them more carefully. Despite their feline features, they were clearly evolved from a different branch of development than Earth cats. They had opposable thumbs, and their facial structure was more human than animal. Their fur was beautiful with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the light. Luna noticed his examination and spoke up. "We are called the Falari," she said. "Our people have been spacefaring for over 1,000 years, but we preferred to stay on our homeworld. We were not warriors or conquerors. We just wanted to live in peace." Marcus felt another stab of anger at the corporate alliance. These beings had done nothing wrong, except exist on a planet that contained something the alliance wanted. They had been torn from their homes and sold like animals simply because they lacked the military strength to defend themselves. After they finished eating, Marcus showed them to the small passenger compartment where they could rest. There was only one bed, but they seemed comfortable sharing it curled up together like a litter of kittens. Marcus left them to sleep and returned to the bridge where he stared out at the stars and wondered what the hell he was going to do now. His original plan had been to sell the ship and use the credits to book passage to the core worlds where he might find work in one of the major shipyards. But now he was responsible for 3 beings who would be killed or enslaved if the authorities found them. The corporate alliance had strict policies about unauthorized aliens in civilized space. Marcus activated his computers and began researching options. There were rumors of safe havens in the far reaches of the galaxy where refugees from the corporate wars could find sanctuary. Most were probably just stories, but there had to be somewhere they could go. He spent hours reading through reports and trying to separate fact from fiction. The most promising lead was a colony called Haven Station, located near the galactic rim. According to the few reliable sources, he could find it was run by a coalition of refugees and dissidents who had rejected corporate rule. The journey would take at least 3 weeks using his ship's limited faster than light drive. He would need to avoid all major shipping lanes and corporate patrol routes, which meant taking a circuitous path through some of the most dangerous regions of space. Marcus looked at his fuel reserves and did some quick calculations. He had enough fuel to make the journey, but there would be no room for error. If they encountered any problems or delays, they would be stranded in deep space with no hope of rescue. As he worked, Luna appeared in the doorway to the bridge. She moved silently on bare feet, and had somehow managed to clean herself up while he was distracted. Without the dirt and fear, she was quite beautiful in an exotic way that reminded him of the sculptures he had seen in museums. "I could not sleep," she said. "Too many nightmares." Marcus nodded, understanding. He had dealt with his own share of nightmares over the years. The memories of Emma's death still haunted him on bad nights. Luna moved to the observation window and stared out at the stars. "We never traveled far from our homeworld," she said. "The universe seems so vast and empty now." Marcus joined her at the window and followed her gaze. "It does not have to be empty," he said. "There are good people out there. Not everyone supports what the corporate alliance is doing. Some of us remember what it was like before the wars, when different species could coexist peacefully." Luna turned to look at him with those large luminous eyes. "Do you really believe we can find such a place?" she asked. Marcus thought about his research and the rumors of Haven Station. He thought about the risks they would face and the slim chances of success. "I believe we have to try," he said. "The alternative is unacceptable." Luna nodded slowly, and Marcus saw some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. You could have walked away and saved yourself, but you chose to help us instead." "That means more than you know." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks at her gratitude. He was not used to being thanked for doing what he considered the right thing. Most of his life had been spent in the shadows of society, where kindness was seen as weakness and survival was the only virtue that mattered. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly past the viewport. Marcus found himself studying Luna's profile and wondering what her life had been like before the war. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that suggested she had been someone important in her community. "What did you do on your homeworld?" he asked. Luna's ears twitched slightly, and she smiled for the first time since he had met her. "I was a teacher," she said. "I worked with younglings, helping them learn about the history and culture of our people. Mira was studying to be a healer, and Kira was an artist. She painted the most beautiful landscapes you have ever seen." Marcus felt his heart clench again, thinking about all the potential that had been lost when their world was destroyed. These were not primitive savages, as the corporate alliance propaganda claimed. They were educated, intelligent beings with their own rich culture and traditions. "I would like to hear more about your people," he said. Luna's smile widened, and she began to speak about her home world. She told him about the floating cities that drifted through their planet's vast forests, and the crystal gardens where her people grew food and medicine. She described festivals where the entire community would gather to share stories and celebrate their history. As she spoke, Marcus found himself drawn into her words. Luna was a natural storyteller with a gift for bringing distant places to life. He could almost see the silver trees swaying in alien breezes, and hear the songs that her people sang to welcome the dawn. Hours passed without either of them noticing. Luna's voice grew hoarse from talking, but she seemed reluctant to stop. Marcus realized that she needed to share these memories with someone who would listen and understand. She was keeping her culture alive through her words. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with both of them. Luna returned to the passenger compartment to check on her sisters, while Marcus settled into his pilot's chair for a few hours of rest. He set the ship's automated systems to wake him if anything required his attention. When he woke 8 hours later, the ship was still running smoothly through hyperspace. Marcus checked their position and was pleased to see they were making good time toward the galactic rim. He had programmed their course to avoid all known corporate patrol routes but there was always the risk of encountering pirates or other hazards. The three aliens were awake and huddled together in the main cabin. They looked up nervously when Marcus entered, and he realized they were still afraid despite his reassurances. Years of abuse and terror were not easily overcome. "Good morning," he said as gently as possible. "Did you sleep well?" Luna nodded, but her sisters remained silent. Marcus noticed that they had not touched the food he had left for them the night before. "You need to eat," he said. "We have a long journey ahead, and you will need your strength." Luna translated for her sisters, who reluctantly began to nibble at the protein bars. Marcus could see they were still weak from malnutrition and stress. Over the next few days, Marcus established a routine with his passengers. He would spend time on the bridge monitoring their progress, while the three aliens rested and recovered in the main cabin. Luna gradually began to open up more, sharing stories about her homeworld and her people. Mira and Kira remained shy, but they began to show signs of trust. Mira would sometimes help Marcus with small maintenance tasks around the ship, while Kira spent hours sketching pictures of things she remembered from home. Her artwork was remarkably skilled, and Marcus found himself looking forward to seeing what she would create next. The ship's food supplies were running low by the end of the first week. Marcus had calculated their needs based on feeding one person for a month, not 4 beings for 3 weeks. He began rationing their meals more strictly and looked for ways to supplement their diet. Luna noticed his concern and approached him privately. "We are grateful for everything you have done," she said, "but we do not want to be a burden. If the food runs out, you should save yourself." Marcus looked at her in shock. He could not believe she was suggesting he abandon them. "That is not going to happen," he said firmly. "We are in this together now. All of us make it to safety or none of us do." Luna's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded her understanding. Marcus realized that she had been prepared to sacrifice herself and her sisters to ensure his survival. During the second week of their journey, Marcus detected signs of a corporate patrol ship following their trail. The readings were faint but unmistakable. Someone was tracking them through hyperspace using methods that should have been impossible with his ship's outdated systems. Marcus immediately changed course and began taking evasive maneuvers. He dropped out of hyperspace twice to confuse their pursuers, and used his knowledge of asteroid fields and nebulae to hide their signature. The patrol ship seemed to lose their trail, but Marcus knew it was only a matter of time before they were found again. That night, he gathered the 3 aliens together and explained the situation. They were being hunted by corporate forces, and their chances of reaching Haven Station were diminishing rapidly. Luna listened to his report with growing alarm, while her sisters pressed closer together in fear. "What can we do?" Luna asked. Marcus had been thinking about that question for hours. Their options were limited but not non-existent. They could try to reach one of the independent trading posts scattered throughout the Rim territories, but most of those were controlled by pirates or criminals who would sell them back to the corporate alliance. "There is another option," he said slowly. "It is dangerous, but it might work. There are stories about a group of rebels who operate in the Veil Nebula. They call themselves the Free Fleet, and they are supposed to help refugees escape from corporate territory." Luna's ears perked up with interest. "You think they would help us?" she asked. Marcus shrugged. He had no idea if the Free Fleet even existed, or if they would be willing to help 3 alien refugees. But it was better than sitting still and waiting for the corporate patrol to find them. The journey to the Veil Nebula would take them through some of the most dangerous space in the galaxy. The region was filled with gravitational anomalies and electromagnetic storms that could tear apart an unshielded ship. Pirates and worse things were rumored to lurk in the nebula's depths. Marcus spent the next day plotting a course through the hazards. His ship's navigation computer was old but reliable. and he had experience flying through dangerous space from his years as a salvage operator. If they were careful and lucky, they might make it through alive. As they approached the nebula's outer edge, Marcus could see why it was called the Veil. Sheets of ionized gas stretched across space like gossamer curtains, hiding whatever lay beyond. The electromagnetic radiation made his instruments useless beyond a few thousand kilometers. They dropped out of hyperspace at the nebula's edge and began their approach using only visual navigation. Marcus had to rely on his experience and intuition to guide them through the swirling gases and hidden obstacles. The three aliens watched in fascination as ribbons of colored light danced past their viewports. Hours passed as they penetrated deeper into the nebula. Marcus's hands were cramped from gripping the controls, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the ship's climate control. Navigation was becoming increasingly difficult as the density of the gas clouds increased. Suddenly, Luna pointed out the viewport and called out in excitement. There Marcus followed her gaze and saw lights moving through the nebula ahead of them. As they drew closer, the lights resolved into the shapes of spacecraft, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The ships were sleek and organic, looking with curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Their hulls were covered in bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with soft light. There were dozens of them moving in formation through the nebula's depths. Marcus opened a communication channel and broadcast on standard frequencies. "This is Marcus Kane requesting assistance," he said. "We are refugees seeking sanctuary from corporate forces. Please respond." For several minutes there was only static. Then a voice came through the speakers speaking accented galactic standard. "Marcus Kane, you are in the territory of the Free Fleet. State your business and prepare to be boarded." Marcus felt a surge of relief. The Free Fleet was real, and they were willing to talk. He quickly explained their situation and requested safe passage to Haven Station. The voice on the other end listened without interruption before responding. "You will follow our ships to the sanctuary," he said. "Do not deviate from the prescribed course, or you will be destroyed." Marcus acknowledged the instructions and watched as one of the alien ships moved to escort them deeper into the nebula. The journey to the sanctuary took another 6 hours. Marcus marveled at the skill of their escorts as they navigated through hazards that would have destroyed his ship. The Free Fleet vessels moved with an almost organic grace that suggested they were not entirely mechanical. Eventually, they emerged from the gas clouds into a vast hollow space within the nebula. Marcus gasped as he saw what lay before them. A massive space station hung in the center of the hollow, surrounded by hundreds of ships of every conceivable design. The station itself was clearly built from salvaged materials, but it was enormous and obviously well populated. "Welcome to Freedom Station," the escort pilot said over the comm. "You are now under the protection of the Free Fleet." Marcus felt tears of relief streaming down his face as he guided his ship toward the docking bay. They had made it. Against all odds, they had found sanctuary. As they docked, Marcus turned to look at his three passengers. Luna was crying tears of joy while her sisters held each other tightly. They had survived their ordeal and found a place where they could live free from corporate oppression. But Marcus knew their journey was far from over. Freedom Station was just the beginning. They would need to build new lives and find their place in a community of refugees and rebels. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Marcus felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. The docking bay was a hive of activity as beings of dozens of different species worked together to maintain and repair the fleet's ships. Marcus watched through his viewport as humans worked alongside insectoid aliens, while crystalline beings directed floating repair drones. It was a sight he had never expected to see. A delegation approached their ship as Marcus finished the docking procedures. The group was led by a tall human woman with short gray hair and scars that spoke of a lifetime of battles. She wore a simple uniform without rank insignia, but carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to command. Behind her walked a diverse group, including what appeared to be a reptilian alien with golden scales, and a being of pure energy contained within a mechanical frame. Marcus realized he was looking at representatives of the Free Fleet's Leadership Council. Marcus activated the ship's external speakers and addressed the delegation. "I am Marcus Kane," he said. "I request sanctuary for myself and 3 refugees from the Corporate Alliance." The gray-haired woman stepped forward and smiled. "I am Admiral Hayes," she said. "Welcome to Freedom Station." "We have been expecting you." Marcus looked puzzled. Expecting them? How was that possible? They had made their decision to seek out the Free Fleet only days ago. "Word travels fast in the underground," the Admiral explained. "We heard about your auction hall rescue on Meridian Station. It takes courage to spend your last credits saving strangers. That is exactly the kind of person we need in the Free Fleet." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He had not realized that news of his actions had spread so quickly. The Admiral gestured toward the station's main airlock. "Come," she said. "Let us meet your passengers and get you all settled." "You have had a long journey." Marcus gathered Luna and her sisters, and they followed the delegation through the station's corridors. The interior was a maze of repurposed sections from dozens of different ships and stations. The walls were lined with pipes and conduits that carried power and life support to every corner of the massive structure. They passed through areas where refugees from dozens of worlds had made their homes. Children played in communal spaces while adults worked at various tasks. Marcus saw workshops where weapons were being manufactured and training facilities where volunteers learned to fight. The Free Fleet was clearly more than just a haven for refugees. It was a military organization dedicated to opposing corporate expansion. Marcus wondered if he was ready to become part of something larger than himself. They were shown to quarters in a residential section of the station. The rooms were small but clean and comfortable with all the basic amenities. Luna and her sisters would share one room while Marcus was given a single nearby. For the first time in weeks, they would be able to sleep without fear of discovery. After they had settled in, Admiral Hayes invited Marcus to join her for dinner in the station's main dining hall. The facility was enormous with hundreds of tables where beings of every description shared meals and conversations. The noise was overwhelming but somehow comforting. As they ate, the Admiral explained the history of the Free Fleet. It had been founded 10 years ago by refugees from the first corporate expansion campaigns. What had started as a small group of survivors had grown into a formidable military force with over 200 ships and 50,000 personnel. "We are not just running away from the corporate alliance," Admiral Hayes said. "We are fighting back. Every ship we liberate, every world we protect weakens their grip on the galaxy. Your rescue of those 3 aliens was exactly the kind of action we admire." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the praise. He had not rescued Luna and her sisters to make a political statement. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. But he was beginning to understand that sometimes doing the right thing had larger consequences than he had imagined. The Admiral seemed to read his thoughts. "You are wondering what we want from you," she said. Marcus nodded. He had learned to be suspicious of anyone who offered help without asking for something in return. Nothing in the galaxy was free, especially sanctuary from the corporate alliance. "We want you to join us," Admiral Hayes said simply. "Your skills as a salvage operator would be valuable to our cause. More importantly, you have something even more precious. You have compassion. Too many of our people have become hardened by years of war. We need reminders of what we are fighting for." Marcus thought about her offer as he looked around the dining hall. These people had built something remarkable from nothing. They had created a society where different species could coexist peacefully and work together toward common goals. It was everything the corporate alliance claimed to be but never delivered. "What about Luna and her sisters?" he asked. The Admiral smiled. "They are welcome to stay as long as they like," she said. "We have excellent educational facilities and medical care. Luna's skills as a teacher would be valuable, and we always need healers and artists." Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had been worried about how he would care for three beings who had no money or resources. But the Free Fleet was offering them a chance to rebuild their lives and contribute to something meaningful. That night, Marcus met with Luna and her sisters to discuss their options. They were free to leave if they chose, but they had nowhere else to go. The galaxy was a dangerous place for refugees, especially ones who belonged to a species that was actively being hunted. Luna spoke for all of them when she said they wanted to stay. "We have lost our homeworld," she said, "but perhaps we can help build something new here." The Free Fleet represents everything our people believed in before the war: peace, diversity, and cooperation between species. Marcus felt his decision crystallizing. He had spent 5 years drifting through the galaxy without purpose or direction. The loss of his family had left him hollow and angry, with nothing to live for except basic survival. But rescuing Luna and her sisters had reminded him that there were still things worth fighting for. The next morning, Marcus officially joined the Free Fleet. He was assigned to the salvage division, where his experience would be put to good use. The fleet was constantly in need of spare parts and raw materials that could only be obtained by scavenging from abandoned ships and stations. Luna was offered a position teaching alien languages and cultural studies to the fleet's diverse population. Many of the refugees had never encountered beings from other worlds, and her knowledge would help them work together more effectively. She accepted eagerly, thrilled to have a purpose again. Mira was enrolled in the medical training program, where she could develop her natural healing abilities. The fleet's doctors were impressed by her instinctive understanding of anatomy and disease. Kira was given access to the art studios, where she could continue her painting, while helping document the cultures of the various refugee populations. In the weeks that followed, Marcus threw himself into his new role with enthusiasm he had not felt in years. He led salvage missions to derelict ships and abandoned stations, bringing back valuable materials that kept the fleet operational. The work was dangerous but rewarding. During one mission to an ancient battlefield, Marcus discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in the wreckage of a destroyed corporate dreadnought was a data core containing intelligence about planned attacks on independent worlds. The information was recent and detailed enough to prevent massacres. Admiral Hayes called an emergency meeting of the fleet's leadership council when Marcus presented his findings. The data revealed corporate plans to attack 3 more worlds within the next 2 months. Thousands of innocent beings would die unless someone warned them. The council voted unanimously to intervene. 3 task forces would be dispatched to the threatened worlds with orders to evacuate the populations and defend them if necessary. It would be the largest military operation in the Free Fleet's history. Marcus volunteered for the mission to Kepler-7, a mining colony populated by peaceful crystalline beings. Luna insisted on accompanying him along with her sisters. They wanted to help save others the way Marcus had saved them. The journey to Kepler-7 took 2 weeks through hyperspace. Marcus commanded a small fleet of converted cargo ships, while Luna and her sisters worked to organize the evacuation procedures. They had become skilled at coordinating refugee operations during their time on Freedom Station. When they arrived at Kepler-7, they found the colony in chaos. Corporate ships had already begun their bombardment of the main mining facilities. The crystalline beings were trying to flee, but had nowhere to go. Their own ships were too slow to outrun corporate interceptors. Marcus immediately began coordinating the evacuation, while Luna and her sisters worked to calm the terrified refugees. The Free Fleet ships provided cover, while transport vessels, loaded with families and their few possessions. It was a race against time as more corporate ships arrived every hour. The battle for Kepler 7 lasted 3 days. Marcus watched from the bridge of his ship as Free Fleet fighters engaged corporate interceptors in deadly combat. The casualties were heavy on both sides, but the evacuation continued without pause. On the final day, Luna came to Marcus with devastating news. The corporate forces had landed ground troops and were advancing on the refugee camps. Thousands of beings who had not yet been evacuated were trapped with nowhere to run. Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He ordered the Free Fleet ships to begin a fighting retreat, while he took a small force to provide cover for the remaining civilians. It was a suicide mission, but it was the only way to save as many lives as possible. The battle was brief but vicious. Marcus's small force held the corporate troops long enough for the last transports to escape, but the cost was enormous. Half his people were killed or captured, including many beings he had come to consider friends. Marcus himself was wounded in the final assault when a corporate plasma cannon destroyed his ship's bridge. He managed to reach an escape pod but lost consciousness as it ejected into space. The last thing he saw was Luna's face pressed against the viewport of her rescue ship as it tried to reach him. He woke up 3 days later in the medical bay of Freedom Station. His body was covered in bandages, and his left arm was in a regeneration chamber. The doctors told him he was lucky to be alive, but the physical injuries were nothing compared to the emotional trauma of losing so many friends. Luna and her sisters rarely left his bedside during his recovery. They had become his family in a way that surprised him. The bond forged by their shared experiences had grown into something deeper than mere friendship. Luna in particular had become precious to him in ways he was still learning to understand. When he was finally able to walk again, Marcus found that the Free Fleet had grown enormously. News of their successful evacuation missions had spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring other refugee groups to join their cause. Freedom Station was being expanded to accommodate the new arrivals. Admiral Hayes offered Marcus a promotion to fleet captain with command of his own task force. The offer was tempting, but Marcus had other plans. He wanted to continue rescue operations, but on a smaller scale where he could make a more personal difference. Instead, he accepted command of a single ship with a small crew of volunteers. His mission would be to seek out isolated groups of refugees and bring them to safety. It was dangerous work, but it was exactly what he wanted to do. Luna and her sisters requested permission to join his crew. They had proven their worth during the Kepler 7 operation, and Marcus could not imagine working without them. Together, they would continue the work of saving beings who had nowhere else to turn. Their first mission took them to the edge of corporate space, where a small group of survivors from the vegan system were hiding on a dead world. The beings were barely alive after months of starvation and exposure. Marcus and his crew spent weeks nursing them back to health before transporting them to safety. Word of their success spread quickly through the underground networks that connected refugee populations across the galaxy. Soon Marcus was receiving requests for help from dozens of different worlds. Each mission was unique, but they all shared the same goal of saving innocent lives. Months passed as Marcus and his crew continued their rescue operations. They developed techniques for extracting refugees from hostile environments and established safe houses throughout the Rim territories. The work was exhausting but deeply satisfying. During this time, Marcus found himself growing closer to Luna. She had become his closest advisor and friend. But their relationship was evolving into something more complicated. He was falling in love with her, but was unsure if she felt the same way. One evening, as they watched the stars from the ship's observation, Deck Luna finally spoke about her feelings. She told Marcus that she had been in love with him since the day he rescued her from the auction platform. She had been afraid to say anything because she did not want to complicate their working relationship. Marcus felt his heart soar as he realized that his feelings were reciprocated. They had both been damaged by the tragedies in their pasts, but they had found healing in each other. Their love had grown from shared suffering into something beautiful and strong. They were married in a simple ceremony on Freedom Station, with Mira and Kira serving as Luna's attendants. Admiral Hayes performed the ceremony while hundreds of refugees and Free Fleet personnel looked on. It was a celebration of hope and new beginnings. The wedding marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Marcus and Luna continued their rescue missions, but now